Good evening. It is June 8th, and I'd like to call the Special Board of County Commission meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. The only item on the agenda today is the presentation of the fiscal year 18 budget development by the county manager. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak to the motion? Seeing none, back to the board. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion is unanimous. Commissioner Hutchinson out of the room. So, Mr. Manager, I know it's been a long process for your staff. I appreciate them being here today. I know right when we start, they're like breathing out, okay, we're finally done. So I ask for their patience over the coming 45 to 60 days, but we look forward to hearing your budget message and your presentation today. And so with that, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. Serving as the county's Chief Administrative Officer, I have the responsibility to present essentially a tentative budget and propose your initial millage rates that would support that budget. And as I convey this budget to you, Mr. Chair, it ultimately, on the second meeting, the second budget adoption meeting in September, it fully becomes the Board of County Commissioners budget, and then we keep right on working, Mr. Chair. We adopt your budget. It's the biggest policy decision that you make every year. Those are the facts. And you already hit on it, Mr. Chair. I have absolutely the reason that we are able to do what we do and the time that we do it are in part the folks that are sitting behind me and the 800 other ones that are out providing public services right now. Mr. Chair, this is the most transparent and open and process with public participation at every opportunity. I think we had 16 budget meetings, so there was nothing slipped through the budget. The board literally went through each particular expenditure and made the decision that was adopted in, I believe, 12 minutes without any public comment at the first or second adoption hearing. So I'm going to suggest, Mr. Chair, that we try and replicate last year's process this year. Now, with that, as a preface, Mr. Chair, we have, no pun intended, storm clouds, financial storm clouds on the horizon, that it's my responsibility to do the best I can to position us accordingly. I will not speak highly of the budget process in Tallahassee. We have ours in the public. A couple of them meet behind closed doors and come up with $83 billion in expenditures. It seems like it's who can veto the most good that can go into a local community, but I see that our governor found reason to veto $410 million, of which our Newberry Rail Trail project was a $500,000 victim. We do have $250,000, thankfully, coming for Noonan's Lake. That's a continuation project. It was just over 7 weeks ago, Mr. Chair, that I hadn't had my first budget meeting yet with my departments, and I gave the looking forward report. This report borrows heavily from what I had related public to the commission back on the 19th of April. I am pleased to report that, and again, this is the recurring theme of keep quality staff in place and position us for the future. And so I'm going to be very careful on my recommendations for recurring expenses, because with the very likely adoption of an additional $25,000 homestead exemption, this county's financial hit will be in the millions. It's going to be somewhere, depending upon the numbers that you look at, it'll be in excess of $7 million. I think it could approach $9 million. At one time, if that $25,000 exemption had covered the $75,000 to $100,000 in assessment, it would have actually been somewhere in the neighborhood of $13 million. I'm not trying to advance this, Mark, so I know the board's got different things to look at. But I'm recommending a decrease, Mr. Chair. This is my third budget to present, And I actually inherited a budget that was about 7 weeks old when I came here back in 2014. But we're recommending our millage rate go to 8.8681. I'm not sure what our surrounding local governments are going to do with their millage rate, Mr. Chair, but we're reducing our millage rate. At least that's my recommendation. That's going to put over $800,000 back in the pockets of our taxpayers, and I put it in writing. I stand by the words, and Mr. Chair, I would also recommend any further valuation increases, because remember, on June 1 we get the tentative valuations, and then we get our certified or final on July 1. If any millage, if we see any continued increase in property values, I would recommend that that be converted to millage reduction, but 3 or more of you will make that determination. Probably one of the biggest events that we're going to see this year, quite frankly, is putting our tourist money. I brag about the commission when I go to statewide meetings. I said, our commission has found out how to take tourism dollars and convert them into economic development, and quite frankly, economic development in a part of the community that's received nothing but lip service, in my opinion, for about 2 generations. And that is the fairgrounds. This board was wise enough in past boards to secure a piece of property, the Wiesman Track, and I will do everything I can to make sure that we break ground yet this calendar year. And with that, we also, we've had a chance to meet with one of the water management districts, and I think we have a great opportunity not only for a facility that I will relate in a little more detail in just a few moments, but we have the opportunity to, working with our EPD staff and with St. John River Water Management Districts, to literally create an educational opportunity in wetlands and wetlands management. So I think it will be a premier setting, not only indoors but outdoors. I'm also pleased that the board has found alternate revenue source opportunities in the creation of fire assessment, which you've voted, but you've not yet voted the creation of the stormwater utility fee. And also we saw the opportunity to continue our community agency partnership program, as we know it, the CAP programming. I think this board had wanted to be somewhere in the 1% range, and so there is an additional $150,000 that's been placed in the budget, although the board very wisely, in my opinion, advanced the awards for another year so that our great community support services staff could streamline the process even more. I met with the constitutional officers back on Groundhog Day at 2 p.m., February 2nd. I had Tommy Crosby there in case they had any real hard questions for numbers, but the 5 constitutionals were there. I really appreciate their partnership and their the courtesy that they've shown me. And at that point in time, we talked about pay increases for our staff and also health care costs. And I had made the comment to them that that was what I saw the ability to be able to do dependent upon board action, and that is to budget for those pay increases for our staffs and also address the increase in our healthcare costs. The board did a couple of years ago create and allow for the development of a employee health clinic, and I'm finally happy to say that after a year of increasing monthly expenditures on our claims, people are now finally getting the health care they need, and those claims are now starting to go in the direction that we want. And I'm happy to hear our finance director, or happy to see our finance director shaking his head affirmatively. So please put that on the record. Also, the other thing is when you have 60.47% of the citizens, Mr. Chair, and as elected officials, you all know what a landslide is. That's in excess of 60% of the vote. That's what our citizens said they wanted in the wild spaces. Public places initiative, that did pass, and we have, and the board also was visionary in their creation of a Parks and Conservation Lands Department, and our new director, he's not new anymore, I think he's been here for at least a month or so, so that's becoming an old hand. Charlie Howder is out looking for the best pieces of property that we can put into our great system to make it even better. As I mentioned, we do have increases that I have recommended to be covered by your county departments and also the 5 constitutional officers, and also the increase that we have not only in workers' comp but also in the Florida retirement system, which is it's a required contributory system. We've budgeted for those dollars too. That took a big chunk out of the increase. Our budget was based on a 7.1 or a 7.2% increase. Our MSTUs, municipal service taxing unit budgets, were based on a 7.1% increase. The general fund on a 7.2% increase. And I'm hopeful you might see just a little bit more before July 1. And again, I've made my recommendation on what you should do. One of the things that I really want to, the canary in the coal mine's already died, and that is the one that alerted us to the increases in the community redevelopment agency areas. Our payments to the city of Gainesville alone will go from 4.8 to over $6 million this year. I think when you have buildings like the Standard, $125 million, it's real difficult for me to describe that as blight. I've had that discussion with the property appraiser, and that's something that I just want to keep on the board's radar screen. That's not sustainable. When you're getting massive double-digit increases, I'm just not sure how much more the board should have to pay when you're paying $2 out of every $3 that goes into development. So I hope the board continues to share that opinion, Mr. Chair. You know, one of the things that's been up on the screen is the dollar bill, and this has been used in so many local governments for so long, but it's still, as you know, we talk about different funds, and commissioners, the taxpayer only has one pocket, but we have multiple funds that we pull from when we provide services. Because the board had only 16 budget meetings, every public meeting, you only have 4 opportunities for the citizens to speak to you. You're convenient for criticism, and that's fine. That's local government. I think the government closest to the citizens has been said thousands of times is the one that governs the best, but everybody that raises a tax, they don't hear about it. You do. It won't be long, and you'll be getting comments because the city's raising their tax rate, or the school board, or water management district. They'll come here and complain to you. And when you take a look at that fractured dollar, quite frankly, less than 59 cents of the above dollar is actually allocated by the board, and fully over 22 cents of that 59 cents goes to the sheriff. The rest goes to the other constitutional officers and your capital projects. A lot of citizens don't realize that you're supporting the court system. And there are a lot of expenses that literally the board is a pass-through. But the only thing that doesn't pass through is the criticism for taxes. For the 4th year in a row, I'm happy to say that we can quit talking about the not-so-great recession. I've already mentioned that your property values have gone up, and I'm real pleased with that. But because of that, we had expenses that I felt had to be covered. But quite frankly, I think the taxpayer should see some relief, and hopefully that will be the approach that the board takes as they deliberate their budget. The next chart shows the proposed millage rates that I'm recommending for the FY18 budget. Won't dwell on it a lot. The board has it in front of them. General fund, with a reduction in the millage change, I'm recommending only a simple majority vote to adopt the millage rate. I'm not looking for increases there. We do have, because it's such a small millage rate, we're recommending a modest increase of 0.0462 mills, but that requires a supermajority vote of the board for the MSTU unincorporated, and sometime over the next 4 or 5 weeks, Mr. Chair, we will have an opportunity to go through exactly what those components are. I have continued to advocate strong increases in the MSTU for law enforcement. I think public safety is important to all of our citizens, but the budget that I'm recommending to cover the things that I have discussed with the constitutional officers collectively would require a supermajority, or 4 of the 5 of you, to vote for the MSTU for law enforcement. And of course, the board just gave the direction to essentially eliminate the MSTU for fire services. So that was an easy one to say, eliminate that millage rate. The coming, and I think I've spent enough time talking about the MSTUs. We do have pending board final action, stormwater that would be funded through an MSBU assessment fee. I think it's starting out very modestly at about $30 for a residential unit, and I think the board, like in the fire assessment, will, I think, would be well advised to look at hardship opportunities and other items that would be construed as exemptions. The gas tax, probably one of the biggest challenges we've had is, first of all, the state saw fit to index their gas tax, but they've never allowed local government to have the same financing abilities. When I read the paper, when I read the letters to the editor, when I read the emails that we get, our citizens expect their roads to be taken care of, and that's why they pay gas tax. I understand the gas tax can be used for other services within the community, but I think the primary use should remain maintenance of our roadway system. I know the board did agree to a new funding formula for the 4th, 5th, and 6th cents, and to the citizens that are listening or viewing, there are 11 cents of a gas tax. There's the first 3 pennies, the second 3 pennies, and then the last nickel, which was the last one adopted. The problem with the situation is that funding is continuing to erode, and actually, even though we're putting about $3.3 million this year, general fund and other funds to roadways, Tommy, 3.3? 3.6 with my recommendation of increase. The problem is part of that 10% increase that I promised the board I would try and fund every year, some of that increase had to go to the city. So, you know, basically you're transferring general fund money across the street. Negotiations will take place, and I would like to point out in the document, it's not going to be in the coming year. Mr. Chair, well before we get done with this calendar year, I strongly recommend we put the 11 cents to bed. So I would say hopefully in the coming few months, and I would ask the board to press that issue, or please explain to me why it's not important to move forward on it. But I think I see the heads nodding, and I'm pleased with that. Wild Spaces Public Place is $9.2 million this year. And I'm happy to report that with our new Parks and Conservation Lands Director, we got a phenomenal career with water management districts and land acquisition, but he says he now has the best job he's ever had. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. He said it to me once. Charlie's in the room. That's a thumbs up. So we've got a lot of work to do there, and I think we're going to be pretty creative in how we match some of those dollars, because I don't want to just spend $1 and get $1 worth. I really want to get $2 or $3 worth. So, Charlie, those are your marching orders. Healthcare coverages, the board's done everything they can to mitigate the increase in healthcare coverages. We have an excellent employee health clinic, and what we've done is essentially cut out the profit that the middle person gets, and to be a direct provider. COLA increase, we went several years without an increase, and again, the board directed me to tentatively budget a 3% cost of living increase. We have increases that we have to cover in the Florida retirement system. The increases, again, want to make sure I get on the record, increases are not automatic. Many of our employees are covered by 3 different unions. Those increases, anything else, must be bargained. Fairgrounds debt payment. the good news is the fairgrounds, with what we have coming, with other things that have been taken care of with, and I don't want to mix too many issues, but with the tourist development tax, some of the payments that we've had that we've been making, we will be in a situation where hopefully this calendar year, and I've asked Deputy County Manager Jim Harriet to come back to the board as soon as possible with an update on the Parcel E land swap for the fairgrounds. That with the breaking of the grounds at the new fairgrounds, this is going to be a great year. And if we can convert some timberland into public ownership and convert a fairgrounds into a commercial enterprise on the east side, I think we've done two great things. We will continue to do maintenance. You know, I require the facilities management director to be at all board meetings in this chamber, and a lot of you have asked me, why is that? Well, you know, we've had a lot of back and forth, and things happen with our air conditioning system. But and there's no way, I think with 5 commissioners, I could get six different opinions on what the temperature should be in here. But we've had times when the air conditioning system, quite frankly, just hasn't worked. I think it's on a timer that it only malfunctions when we're having commission meetings. I think it runs fine when we're not in here. That being the case, Mr. Chair, I have Charlie Jackson, our facilities management director, sits in the auditorium whenever the board's in here, and I don't think since I've had him do that we've had a single problem with the air conditioning, but we do have a patched together air conditioning system on this building, and we intend to fix it along with, and I know the property appraiser and the supervisor of elections will be happy to know that I'm budgeting money for the replacement of their boiler, which has been the root cause of a lot of the problems with the climate control at the Josiah T. Walls building. So I am budgeting, I think, a responsible amount of money for our facilities management projects. One of the things the board has done, Chief Northcutt, you're here, aren't you? How many critical care units have we put on the road in the last couple of years? 4. Mr. Chair, I'm recommending a 5th one. There's a continued demand. It does generate a fair amount of revenue, which means that you're not paying for the full cost of that unit. Quite frankly, it's a user fee-based service in part, and we're taking a look at, well, we're recommending another peak load critical care unit. The other thing, and I'm real proud of the board for canceling the fire services assistance agreement, we're in the process of locating the perfect spot on Millhopper Road. We won't be recommending bricks and mortar in the construction of a fire station. That'll be a fire rescue service delivery point on Millhopper Road. And Mr. Chair, what we're doing there is meeting the needs of the citizens by actually implementing the master plan that was talked about for a long time and adopted, and we've finally gotten back to doing that. I'm also happy to report that the board's leadership continues in the local county minimum wage, and I'm recommending that the dollars necessary to take care of the services we receive and going from a local county minimum wage of $12.50 to $13. The cap increase I'd mentioned previously of $150,000, the board has great latitude in that, and we had an excellent presentation on food bank needs, what I'll refer to as food bank needs. I had coffee the other day with my counterpart across the street, and I asked him if, since it was a city-based location, if they could come up with $150,000, I would ask the board to match that with $75,000, and we'll see what the city responds. Again, an increase in our commitment, a 10% increase in the commitment to roads. I think this board's probably doing more with general fund money for roads than any other local government that I can find. The property appraiser has convinced me that if he can get a computer appraisal system upgrade, that essentially he will streamline that process, and I think hope to generate, it's a one-time expenditure, and again, I'm careful of my recurring expenditure recommendations, but I think it will add some efficiency to the system and hopefully discover some additional values that have slipped through the system. One of the things that we have an excellent relationship with Paul Myers, who is the local director of the Alachua County Health Department. He's a state employee, and he's actually the number 2 person in the state. We're very fortunate to have Mr. Myers as an Alachua County resident. And some of our most vulnerable, I couldn't do it, I had to do it in 2 years, Mr. Chair, but I'm recommending the second amount of money be added in our contribution to the health department. They'll be able to support 600 additional client visits and an epidemiologist, and I think that's going to be excellent service to our most needy citizens. Medical examiner, we thought it was going to hit last year. It hit this year on an additional $115,000. And then I list several items from the constitutional officers. Ballistic shields and vests for the sheriff. Obviously, they have a life expectancy. They need to be replaced. A replacement of 3 canines, upgrade to the mobile command unit. Supervisor, I think, made an excellent presentation on early voting and voting by mail. It just hopefully is going to help to stimulate a greater turnout in what is normally an abysmal turnout by our citizens to vote. And then I am recommending a couple of positions that I think are value added, and they will keep us in compliance. Grants contract administrator is one in particular that I'm looking at in the purchasing division, and that's for contract compliance and to help in negotiations to get us better prices. Last year the board was very supportive of a halftime 4-H program coordinator. I am confident that when our youth are engaged in wholesome 4-H activities, that they're so busy doing that they don't cause problems for the sheriff or the various police chiefs. And I am recommending that halftime position become full-time. I think that's a commitment to our youth. I will not gloss over the next item that I want to bring to your attention, and I will continue over the next 8, 9, 10 budget meetings that we have. I am absolutely recommending forget anything about Evergreen. This item would have been on my radar, and that is an equity retention pay for my direct reports. I think it's critical with what we're facing over the next 2 years that we do. I recommend everything I possibly can to keep my direct reports in their positions. And quite frankly, when I review what they're paying across the street, and they've had some pretty good vacancies and more on the way, and what I think is really the market for where I could lose staff, I would be remiss in my responsibilities as a county manager if I didn't make a strong professional effort to do what I can for pay equity and retention for my direct reports. Housing services, this board has been a leader and basically a housing first model. We have a great opportunity to, I think, hire a grant and contract compliance specialist. There's an old saying, you don't know what you don't know. Well, I can tell you right now, if you have the right person in there, I think they'll be value added, and there are dollars available, believe it or not, even from the federal government. I do think that there is a great opportunity for grants acquisition, and I think we should invest in those areas within our county government. One of the things that we have that, it's one of those, it's almost like a mandate or an unfunded mandate, and we need to increase our pretrial electronic monitoring, and it's associated with GPS, global positioning, so that people, quite frankly, a couple of the items that we have from civil citation program manager and anyone that works with basically an early release or an intervention type of a program, if we can keep people on the street and monitored and out of the jail, we're doing an excellent job of doing everything possible to keep our expenses down. We also are looking at a behavioral health coordinator. This board is the first in the country that we know of that all of your employees have had mental health first aid training. One of the things that I've talked to the board a couple of times over the past few years, and that is it may come to the point where bringing our janitorial services, our custodians in-house, will save money. We're of the opinion that that has happened, and we can see a savings if we bring them in-house when you look at benefits and our local living minimum wage. We can save about $65,000, so those are significant. I'm also recommending, because of the strong voice of the citizens, and not only acquiring conservation and recreation lands, but also in maintaining them, because I've heard time and again that we need to do a better job of maintenance. I'm looking at a position in an environmental specialist, but more importantly, we have a Parks and Conservation Lands Department now. We need to do a better job of taking care of our existing properties. And for the first time, citizens and families buy these lands through their tax dollars. And I quite frankly think we need to make sure that we run them as family-friendly parks. And I'm recommending for the first time the creation of a park ranger position with limited enforcement capability. I do have some understanding, because about 115 years ago when I left college the first time, I was an enforcement park ranger, and I'm a strong believer in running family areas in our parks. So I'll be more than willing to engage in a discussion on the need for that particular position. The good news, Mr. Chair, is I'm rounding the corner, because I know some of you have other places to go tonight, as do I, but I don't want to rush the message. This board has continued with diminishing resources, in my opinion, because of what the state and the federal government does or does not do with us, that we continue to provide the programs that our citizens expect local government to bring forward. I'm pleased that the board is looking at not only a fire assessment, but a stormwater assessment, because we've heard a few times now that there may be another shoe to drop in Tallahassee this coming year, and the legislature goes back into session in January, where you might find your ability to raise your millage rates preempted without probably a local bill or approval of the legislature. So good luck there. So I think the board is futuristic in their thought process on how you fund services. Unfortunately, it's become ever more clear that our state legislature and our federal government don't see themselves as partners with local government. So my budget is driving us towards self-sufficiency, where we can get partnerships, for instance, with our wild spaces, public places expenditures, absolutely. But if we have to go it alone, I think we just have to prioritize our services and offer the services that our citizens expect. I started out saying that the key to our ability to deliver a budget in the manner that we have and in the time frame that we have is because of the people behind me and the 800 that are not in this room. It's certainly my honor and my pleasure to work with these outstanding professionals, and in the coming budget sessions, Mr. Chair, I look forward to your feedback, your questions, your comments, unless you would like to just take a motion to approve the budget tonight and set the maximum millage rate, and then I can find a lot of time on your schedules. So it's your choice, Mr. Chair.
Do you conclude?
I should have about a minute ago.